first is mitosis, and all cells in the human body undergo mitosis. Except for nervous cells. Sorry, I forgot about that. Most cells in the body undergo mitosis. All right, but our sex cells have a second form of reproduction they can do, called meiosis. All right, and the two major benefits for meiosis compared to mitosis. All right, in meiosis, we are going to reduce the number of chromosomes by half. All right, and we have to do that because we are going to get half of our chromosomes from each parent. We're going to get one half from the mother, one half from the father. So our sperm cell is going to have one copy of chromosomes. The egg cell is going to have one copy of chromosomes. And then when they combine, we'll have a complete set again. All right, the second benefit is that meiosis gives us genetic diversity. All right, in mitosis, we create two daughter cells that are genetically identical to the parent. All right, in meiosis, we are going to create 4 sperm cells which are genetically different. All right, and the phases of meiosis are the same as the phases of mitosis. All right, we're going to go through prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, but we go through it twice. All right, so this is meiosis 1, and then this is meiosis 2, where we have prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase, telophase 2. All right, so I mentioned in lab, markers again. That we have an event called crossing over, which occurs during prophase 1. Crossing over is what makes, or is what gives us genetic diversity. All right, and so basically, as I said, what crossing over is we take some chromosomes, and the chromosomes randomly recombine to create unique DNA. All right, and so like we see up here that all our chromosomes, they're solidly one color. All right, after crossing over, we've got a mixture of different chromosomes together. All right, and how they recombine is completely random. So it will not, so each sperm cell will not be the same. The DNA will be slightly different in each cell. That's part of the reason why we're not exactly like our siblings, right? Sometimes we may be very similar to our sibling. Sometimes we may be extremely different from our sibling. It just depends on how much DNA we share from our parents with our sibling. All right, so this is just a chart comparing mitosis to meiosis. All right, again, one of the major differences is we start with 2 copies of each chromosome, and we end with 2 copies of each chromosome. As opposed to here, we start with 2 copies, we finish with 1 copy each. Yep.
In meiosis, when do the cells become haploid? And during what phase?
In meiosis 2, during meiosis 2.
Okay. So just like prophase or?
But, so for, all you would need to know is that it starts with 2 copies and by the end there's 1. You don't need to know exactly where, but it's just, yeah. I would say probably during anaphase, when they pull the chromosomes to opposite sides of the cell. All right, so our spermicide, or rather, the creation of our sperm cells is called spermatogenesis. All right, and again, it just undergoes meiosis to create these cells. All right, so we start with a cell called a spermatogonium. Right? The spermatogonium undergoes mitosis, and so we create 2 more spermatogonium that are called type A and type B. In type A, our cell just keeps undergoing mitosis. Just a big circle to always ensure that we've got enough spermatogonium to make more sperm cells. Our type B spermatogonium is then known as a primary spermatocyte.
So, is there a trigger for why one might go under more mitosis? Like it'll be the type A or it'll be the type B?
Yeah, there are chemicals which determine it, but I couldn't tell you like the details on it. But yeah, basically we have chemicals that direct it.
Okay.
All right, our primary spermatocyte is gonna undergo meiosis 1. All right, so again, meiosis 1 is just, we have prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, telophase 1. One thing I did leave out. All right, so this starts occurring, spermatogenesis, due to rising testosterone levels that surge following puberty. All right, so after we undergo meiosis 1, our cells are called secondary spermatocytes. All right, the secondary spermatocytes undergo meiosis 2. All right, so now we have 4 haploid cells called spermatids. All right, then we have one last thing that we have to do before we have functional sperm cells. All right, our spermatids are gonna undergo a process called spermiogenesis. All right, after spermiogenesis, basically that's attaching the flagella and getting a fully functional flagella. And then we have our sperm cells, or spermatozoa. Yeah?
Why did you say it says 2N again?
2N means 2 copies of each chromosome. N represents chromosome. All right, just a little bit left. All right, so the blood supply to the penis is provided by the internal pudendal artery, but I don't care if you know that name. All right, the pudendal artery, though, breaks off into two branches called the dorsal and the deep artery. Those two you need to know.
And you said it branches off into what?
The dorsal and the deep artery. Right? The dorsal artery is a superficial artery that provides blood to the skin and really to most of the penis. All right, but this is the main artery when the penis is limp or flaccid, so at rest, when it's not erect. The deep artery goes to the corpus cavernosum, and it only opens up when we become sexually aroused. All right, when that when that deep artery opens up, it fills the corpus cavernosum with blood, and the penis becomes engorged, and that's what causes an erection. All right, and then the nerve supply for the penis. All right, sensory and motor nerves from the S2 to S4 spinal nerves control the sensory and motor sensations. All right, and the autonomic nervous system also plays a big role with the sexual response. So the penis gets sympathetic nerve fibers from T12 to L2 spinal nerves and gets parasympathetic nerve fibers from the S2 to S4 nerves as well. All right, then lastly, we're going to finish this lecture up talking about the sexual response. All right, what is going on with our body when we're engaging in sex? All right, so the first stage is just called excitement. All right, excitement occurs when we become sexually aroused. All right, so physical changes that we're going to see is vasocongestion. Vasocongestion means increased blood flow to the genitals. All right, we also see what's known as myotonia. All right, that's increased muscle tone. And so our muscles become more rigid. All right, and then lastly, we're going to get increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, and an increased respiratory rate. So your breathing's going to speed up, your heart rate's going to speed up. All right, erection also occurs during the excitement phase. All right, erection is necessary for the body or for the penis to enter the vagina. All right, an erection is caused by the parasympathetic nervous system. All right, so basically our parasympathetic nervous system releases a chemical called nitric oxide, and then nitric oxide causes vasodilation of the deep artery, and that's how the corpus cavernosum fills with blood. All right, and then we enter a plateau phase. A plateau phase is basically where we maintain all the physical changes that occur during excitement throughout the act of sex. All right, so this is going to last up to right before orgasm. All right, so third is orgasm. Orgasm is a short, intense, pleasurable reaction that occurs and lasts for up to 15 seconds or so. All right, and then simultaneous to an orgasm, there is also ejaculation. All right, that is the discharge of semen out of the urethra.
So is ejaculation with orgasm, or is it like kind of separated?
They're two different things, but they're occurring simultaneously.
Okay.
Right? Ejaculation is caused by the sympathetic nervous system. All right, so I have a mnemonic to remember what causes erection and ejaculation. All right, the phrase is point and shoot. All right, point is erection. P for point, P for parasympathetic. Shoot is ejaculation, S for shoot, S for sympathetic.
Children.
All right, ejaculation happens in kind of two phases. So the first part is we stimulate peristalsis of the ductus deferens, and we contract the smooth muscle in the prostate gland and the seminal vesicle. All right? That is going to produce our semen, because we're getting sperm from the ductus deferens, or the vas deferens, and we're getting prostatic fluid and seminal fluid from the two glands.
So this is when the fluid from the glands start to build up too?
Yeah, this is when we're forming the semen.
Okay.
All right, and then expulsion. So this is creating the semen. Expulsion is the semen being discharged from the body. All right, so in expulsion, essentially muscles around the urethra contract to to basically expel the semen out of the reproductive tract. Right. But at the same time, it also causes the internal urethral sphincter to contract. Right? Because remember, the urethra is part of both the urinary and the reproductive system. All right, so this does two things. One, this prevents urine from being discharged with the semen.
Would the urine kill the semen if they were to come in contact with
It
each other?
could, depend on what is in the semen or what's in the urine, because urine could be very dilute
Oh.
and concentrate, or it could be highly concentrated and really acidic or really alkaline. Yeah.
It's probably like a weird question, but when they shoot, is it the same amount every single time, or no?
No, it all varies. And the more you have sex, you're going to produce less each time. All right, this also prevents semen from entering the bladder. So basically, it's preventing the backward flow of semen.
Oh, okay.
All right, so basically, if you're a normal, healthy adult male, it is impossible to urinate and orgasm at this, not orgasm, and ejaculate at the same time. All right, and then lastly, we have resolution. All right, this is where all these physiological changes goes back to your normal resting state. So your heart rate goes back down, your blood pressure decreases, your respiratory rate slows down. All right, and then this is going to be followed in men with a refractory period. So a refractory period, hopefully you learned this when you did the nervous system, but a refractory period is a time when an action cannot occur. All right, so males have a brief refractory period following ejaculation that could last from a minute or two to hours. It just varies greatly from person to person. All right, and then no new information in this. This is just a pictorial version of what I just went through and explained. Yeah. All right, and we will at least start the female reproductive system. Also, let me do this while I'm thinking about it. So I already posted the lectures for the Unit 5, the recorded lectures for the Unit 5 lectures. All right, so you can find them just in the Unit 5 module. And so I posted all the remaining lectures, which the last 3, just because I already had them recorded. But this is the only one that you have to do for next week, because I won't be here. And then when I come back, I will, even though these are already up, I will still give these lectures. Yeah.
So that whole week you won't be here?
I won't be here all next week.
Okay.
All right, so the male reproductive system is pretty straightforward. The female reproductive system, when we get into what we call the sexual cycle, can get a little bit more complicated. All right, but we're going to first start out talking about the anatomy of the female reproductive system and the function. All right, so the major function of the female reproductive system is 1, to produce egg cells, and 2, It's to provide an environment where a fetus can grow and survive. All right, and this actually is a really good slide to use to study for lab. All right, the female reproductive model we have downstairs looks exactly like this. All right, so structures that we have. So one, we have the uterus. All right, the uterus is where, in a normal pregnancy, the uterus is where the fetus grows and develops. All right, coming off of the uterus, there's actually two. We can only see one in this image. But there's this kind of long tube that comes off it, basically laterally, like arms. It goes straight out. And actually, I got another picture that shows it a little better. There. All right, so the uterus has this arm that comes off called the fallopian tube. All right, and then at the end of the fallopian tube, that's where we find the ovary. All right, the ovary is the female gonad. It produces the sex cells, which in this case are egg cells. Yeah,
Ovaries and ovary is the same thing.
same thing. Ovaries singular. Ovaries is plural. But yeah, we do have two ovaries, so that's,
That's why, okay.
because like I said, there's one that comes off of each side of the uterus. All right. The inferior portion of the uterus right here is called the cervix. And there is an opening here that allows sperm to enter into the uterus called the cervical os. All right, the uterus is connected to the external environment through this long tube here. This is the vagina. All right, and then moving over right below the uterus and right in front of the vagina is the urinary bladder and the urethra. Right. This is more for lab, but two common mistakes I see on the lab final a lot. One, people mix up the uterus and the urinary bladder. All right, the uterus is going to be above the bladder. Second mistake I commonly see is people mix up the urethra and the vagina. Right? The urethra is going to be coming out of the urinary bladder. All right, other structures. So in the very front here, we have this bone. That is the pubic symphysis. And then directly in front of the pubic symphysis is this area that's full of adipose tissue, a lot of fat. that is the mons pubis. And again, the mons pubis is where most of the pubic hair is located. Underneath the pubic symphysis, we have this boomerang-looking structure. That is the clitoris. Right? The clitoris is the female equivalent of the glans penis. Right? They develop from the same structure. So they have the same kind of nerve input. All right, and then, so this last part we're going to look at here, this is actually external to the body. It's on the outside. All right, so surrounding the vagina are these two folds of tissue. All right, the one that's closest to the vagina that directly surrounds it is called the labia minora. And I'll show you a better picture of it later. And then we have another fold of tissue that surrounds the labia minora called the labia majora. And then not seen in this model, but the breasts are also a reproductive organ, are part of the reproductive system. All right, so most of the female genitalia is going to be located inside of the body. So things like the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, the uterus, and the vagina. All right, but we do have some external genitalia as well. The breast would be external genitalia. And then this is a term you may or may not have heard before. All right, so often when we speak of women, or I don't mean me, but I'm talking people in general, often when people refer to the external genitalia for females, they just say the vagina. That is inaccurate. The vagina is inside the body. You don't actually see that. All right? The collection, all of the external genitalia that we see on the outside is called the vulva. So that would be like the labia minora, the labia majora, the clitoris. All right, so we're going to start off going over the ovaries. As I mentioned earlier, the ovaries are the female gonads. So the gonads are the structures or the organs which make our sex cells. And again, the function of the ovary is to produce an ova or egg cell. All right, the ovaries are covered, so actually just like the testes, the ovaries are covered by a connective tissue called the tunica albuginea. All right, so just like most of the organs we've talked about all semester, the ovary is divided into different regions. All right, so the outer area is called the cortex. The inner area is called the medulla. Or same over here, as this would be the medulla. Right? The medulla is mostly, in the ovary, is mostly just has a lot of blood vessels. So it's where our blood supply for the ovary is. All right, and so in the cortex, you can kind of see right here, this dark purple circle. All right, this is a structure called a follicle. All right, follicles are only found in the cortex, and the egg cells develop inside the follicle. Okay. So for example, that dark little dot right there, that is a developing egg cell.
Can only one egg develop in a follicle at a time?
Yes. But multiple eggs are developing in multiple follicles simultaneously. But yes, just one egg per follicle. All right, and then we've got some ligaments that are attached to the ovary. Most of them aren't that important. We've got like the ovarian ligament connects the ovary to the uterus. The suspensory ligament, not that important, but it just attaches the ovary to the pelvic wall. And the only one of these I would really worry about is the broad ligament, because that does get questions asked about sometimes. Right? The broad ligament is more like a sheet. All right, and basically it's like you basically draped it over the fallopian tube, and it hangs on down from either side. All right, and it completely surrounds the ovary, and basically helps to hold the ovary in place. But it literally just looks like wings coming off the uterus. All right, then lastly, blood is provided to the ovaries through the uterine artery, and blood drains out of the ovary through the ovarian vein. All right, next we have the fallopian tubes. All right, so again, our fallopian tubes, the end of them are going to be right next or with the ovary. And the purpose of the fallopian tube is when the ovary produces an egg cell, which we call ovulation. That egg cell has to get from the ovary into the uterus. All right, it does that through the fallopian tube.
Is it not connected just for the sake of the picture showing the anatomy? Or,
Yeah,
is there a space that they
Yeah,
float?
but the fallopian tube would be touching it.
Okay.
All right, so not that important, but different regions of the fallopian tube have different names. All right, so this thin portion that comes right out of the uterus is called the isthmus. Right? And then the tube starts to kind of open up, it gets larger, so this enlarged portion is called the ampulla. Right? It then continues down, and the last bit is called the infundibulum. Alright, and then the last thing we see is right here. Highlight this, you're gonna get asked about it. So at the ends of the fimbria, or excuse me, at the end of the fallopian tube, we have these finger-like projections that dangle down from it. And these are called fimbria, or fimbriae plural. All right, so when ovulation occurs and the egg is released, remember that sperm is the only cell that has a flagellum. All right, an egg cell can't move very well. All right, so when it's released, the fimbria literally will scoop up the egg cell and they pull it into the fallopian tube. Yeah.
If you only have one tube, you're only getting eggs from one side.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not that uncommon. Because there is the complication of untreated chlamydia and gonorrhea called pelvic inflammatory disorder. And basically it can cause scar tissue to form and it'll close off one or both of those tubes.
What? That's crazy.
But either way, and I never even thought about this, but yeah, we only produce one egg cell per month. So really, yeah, it's alternating now that I think about it. Like both of them aren't producing an egg each month. We only produce one egg cell a month.
Don't women only have like a certain amount that we have and then that's it? Like we don't make them?
Yes, of your egg cells, yes. You have about between 200 400,000.
And once those are gone, those are it.
Yeah, because those are made in the womb while you're developing as a fetus. You make all of your egg cells. And then that's all you have for your life.
That's dumb.
That's why I said, it's very different from men. Men are just like sperm machines. Like all they do their whole life till they die, they are making sperm. So women do it all in the womb, and that's all the eggs they ever
That's why
have.
women are more valuable though.
No, literally. Commodities over here.
Is it, do they like both release on one tube or like both tubes?
No, so it wouldn't be from that. So for fraternal twins, it is. Oh, in fraternal twins, and it's not super common, but it's not uncommon either. More than one sperm fertilize the same egg.
Isn't that,
So in identical twins, what happens is a fertilized egg undergoes mitosis and it's not supposed to. So then you end up with two identical copies of that fertilized egg. That's how you get identical twins.
What?
it's not a woman that.
That's crazy. I thought they weren't supposed to do that.
They're
No.
not.
They're not supposed to.
Nope.
That's why it's not known.
No, it has to do with the sperm.
Yeah, I thought it was sometimes like you get two eggs from the Philippines.
You can occasionally, I mean, yeah, it does happen.
That's paternal too. That can be paternal also.
Because my.
Yeah, that would be, but again, you would just have two egg cells that are getting hit, are basically both got fertilized.
Okay.
But like I said, it's more common that it would be that two sperm actually fertilize the same egg. Because what happens when
Is
you
there a
have
way to tell?
fertilization is it's like first come, first serve. Like all the sperm are just competing with each other. So an egg cell gets swarmed with millions of sperm at the same time. And so they're all competing to get in. And so first one that gets in is the winner, but sometimes two will get in at the same time.
So what happens to the ones that are like on the outside that aren't winning? What happens when?
They eventually die off and get removed.
Oh, so there's nothing that comes in and kind of swoops them up.
Well, yeah, we have like our phagocytic cells and things, yeah. Alright, so the fin is gonna pull the egg cell up into the fallopian tube. But again, our egg cell, once it's in the fallopian tube, how is the egg supposed to get from here all the way into the uterus? Alright, so one, the fallopian tube contains a layer of smooth muscle, and so it can basically cause peristaltic contractions to help push the egg along. And then secondly, the fallopian tubes are ciliated, meaning they have cilia. All right, again, cilia are little hair cells that beat in one direction to move something across the surface. All right, so the cilia are beating to move the egg towards the uterus.
So those women that have like triplets and quadruplets, they've just been releasing like 4 eggs at a time and stuff.
No, not necessarily. Like I said, it's so normally, like identical twins, it's due to the fertilized egg undergoes mitosis. And so you get 2 identical copies of the cell. That's the only way you can get identical twins.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the cell undergoes mitosis for some reason. But yeah, fraternal twins, like I said, it could be that there's 2 eggs, but again, in my experience, more commonly it's 2 sperm that penetrate the same egg.
Okay.
And did you have your hand up a minute ago, didn't you?
I did, what do you want?
Okay. I just realized I skipped right
No,
over.
you're fine.
All right, then we have the uterus itself. So the uterus is a pear-shaped organ that is not very big. All right, so let's see, where do we want to start? So again, this inferior portion that connects with the vagina is called the cervix. All right, and it contains an opening that allows sperm in. All right, and that's called the cervical os, OS. Bless you. All right, so most of the time, we don't want the cervical os open. All right, we only want to have that opened up and give access to sperm if we've ovulated and we have an egg that's been released. All right, and that's because if it's open to sperm, it's also open to bacteria and other microorganisms that can ascend up there and cause an infection. Right, so to prevent that, the cervix has mucus glands, and it secretes a mucus plug that blocks up the opening to the cervicals, or blocks up the cervical os.
That's kind of gross.
Right? Then during ovulation, the mucus plug goes away. But then as soon as the end of the sexual cycle, or when the sexual cycle restarts, that's going to close back up with mucus.
Can sperm still pass through even if mucus is still there? Or is it just like
They
rare?
can, it's just more difficult.
So is that separate from the period lighting?
What do you mean?
The plug, is that separate from like when you get your when a woman gets her period, the walls kind of get bigger?
I think I'm gonna talk about that in a minute.
So women who can't ovulate or have trouble ovulating, are they missing something or is there like a defect?
I'm not familiar with people not being able to ovulate. But there are people who, yeah, I mean, they're ovulating, but yeah, for whatever reason, there's something going on that makes it harder for fertilization to occur. So they have infertility, I mean, there's so many different causes for that.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not, to my knowledge, I could be wrong, to my knowledge, it's not an issue of not ovulating. At least for most people.
Okay, so people like that have PCOS, do they not ovulate or do they just have a hard time ovulating?
No, they should still ovulate. It's just associated with pain and some other things and, but yeah, they should still be producing an egg cell.
Okay.
But like I said, I'm not an expert on all these things, so yeah, that one I'm not 100% on.
Okay.
All right, I'll probably just wrap this up with the uterus. All right, so other structures that we see here in the uterus. All right, so this curved portion of the uterus is called the fundus. The majority of it is just known as the body. And then again, at the inferior portion, that's the cervix. All right, so next we're going to look at the wall of the uterus. All right, and the uterine wall has 3 layers. Outermost layer, not a big deal. Just know it exists. That is the perimetrium. The middle layer is going to be the thickest layer of the wall. That is called the myometrium, and that contains smooth muscle. So the myometrium is what contracts to push the fetus out of the uterus.
Up it.
All right, and then very important layer, the innermost layer is called the endometrium. All right, so 2 things to know for the endometrium. So one, if fertilization of an egg occurs, the fertilized egg will embed itself in the endometrial layer. And that's where it's going to grow from.
For endometriosis, is that the layer that's affected?
Yeah. Well, yes, and so endometriosis is when you have that tissue in places other than inside the uterus.
Okay.
And so so that's why women with endometriosis, they have more pain, because literally it's other parts of the body. It's like not just the uterus that's causing issues, the endometrium that's in other locations is also doing that. All right, and then secondly, so when a woman ovulates, what happens is, actually, yeah, let me come back to that. All right, I'll just say for now that during menstruation, the endometrium is what breaks down. And that's why that's why there's a bloody discharge during menstruation. All right, you're getting rid of that endometrial lining.
So it's fairly thin then. It's very thin lining.
No, it gets thick.
Oh.
Yeah, so basically the sexual cycle is roughly a 28-day cycle. But again, a lot of variability in that. We're going to go over menstruation later. I'm just answering the question. And so ovulation happens in the middle of the cycle, around day 14. All right, when we ovulate, the endometrial lining gets really thick. All right, that's because we start putting nutrients into that endometrial wall, and we increase the blood flow in case of a possible pregnancy. All right, then, if no pregnancy occurs after a set period of time, then the endometrium completely breaks down. And that's the discharge you get in menses, is from the removal of the endometrium. All right, so last thing. All right, so again, this is just showing the 3 layers. We have a very light or very thin parametrium, a thick myometrium layer, and then here we have the endometrium. All right, so this is what I'm going to finish off with. The endometrium is divided into 2 layers. We have a functional layer, which is the upper layer, and we have a basal layer, which is the lower layer. All right, so I'll just do it like this. All right, so when I was saying that the endometrium gets thick if we're preparing for a possible pregnancy, specifically, it is the functional layer which thickens. All right, and so to nourish all of this thick layer of the endometrium, we increase the amount of blood vessels going to that layer. So when it gets thickened, it has a really rich blood supply. Yeah.
Would that be what causes bloating during pregnancy? Like
No, that has to do with water retention, and I don't exactly know. I learned that a long, long time ago, but I honestly don't remember. I can try to look it up for you. All right, so if no pregnancy occurs, all right, the blood supply goes away, and without the blood supply, the functional layer necroses and dies. All right, and that's what's going on during menstruation. This layer is dying off. All right, and then once menstruation is completed, the basal layer rebuilds the functional layer. And so that happens every month. Well, as long as you don't get pregnant. Every month, we build this up big, and then break it back down. And then the Basali rebuilds it back up.
That's crazy.
Okay, like I said, we'll stop right there.
We're kind of like reptiles.
All right, so I have a breakdown of the exam for you sometime in the next few days, and I will post an announcement about the exam as well.
I mean, you told me I get headaches.